the administration has been railing about mail-in ballots, especially Trump himself, just constantly talking about how it's cheating, even though he himself votes by mail-in ballot, as we have seen documented multiple times. But
Because it's so convenient and it encourages voting.
and it helps more people vote, doesn't it? And that's really the problem, because his whole mission is voter suppression one way or another. So, because this is what you do. Just to be clear, this is what you do when your policies are unpopular, when you're not likely to win an election on the merits of your arguments. So, what you need to do is make it harder for people to vote. Hey there, fellow nerds. Welcome back to another episode of The Present Illness, the podcast where two physicians try to make sense of a world that's a little febrile and definitely underdiagnosed. I'm Arghavan Salles, a surgeon scientist and your friendly neighborhood doom scroller in residence.
And I'm Alyssa Burgart, an anesthesiologist and bioethicist who tracks news and health law cases like their EKGs, full of spikes and surprises. The Present Illness is where we dig into public health, politics, culture, and ethics with a scalpel in one hand and a meme in the other. As a note to our listeners, we often talk about tough topics that can be intense, activating, and they can be a lot. So if you need to take a break, we get it.
Absolutely. And a big thank you to everyone who's listening. Extra love, as always, to our subscribers and those who follow us on any of the various platforms. And a special warm welcome today to anyone who has just stumbled in from the Great American State Fair. What a joy it's been.
I mean, this was all supposed to be part of like celebrating America's like birthday, right?
Yeah. It's our 250th birthday as a country, and we are falling apart right on schedule. But it was
Yeah, this
supposed to
weekend
be
is the 4th of July.
correct. And this was supposed to be a big, bipartisan celebration. Congress had allocated funds for this.
Wasn't wasn't there an executive order against bipartisanship?
I think I think we're just like opposed to bipartisanship by dictate from the president, which is the same as an executive order. There was JD Vance the other day. Okay, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but JD Vance the other day said that the Republicans would love to do something about housing affordability, but the Democrats won't get on board. Meanwhile, there was a bill that was passed, a bipartisan bill for housing affordability, that went to the president's desk, and the president has refused to sign it until the SAVE Act is passed. Anyway, so yeah, but let's blame the Democrats, not the guy in the White House causing all the problems. Anyway, so the Great American State Fair. Here's the thing that's been funny about it. If you've seen any clips at all, what you've probably seen is just comedy, sheer comedy. Like there's an entire national mall that's fenced off. They have like, those kind of barricades that they have if you're expecting a really long line to get entry somewhere. And
There's like no one there.
every video or photo I've seen, it's empty, empty, empty. And then the national mall itself, also relatively empty. Like the maximum number of people I feel like I've seen is somewhere between 50 and 100. Now, not that I've seen every video or photo that exists, but like I keep seeing these posted and I'm like, where is everyone? Now, on the edges, there's the buildings. There's like little buildings for each state, I think. So you can go like learn about Maine or whatever. By the way, some states, I forget the number, have chosen not to send any representatives to this Great American State Fair. So there's like a booth or this little like kind of half building thing for them. And there's no one there. There's just like a sign for like Maine, for example.
Hollywood folks, I really hope that you are writing the farce right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is all just such a great setup for Veep Part 2. Or
a
something
Mel
like
Brooks movie. Mel Brooks, he's doing Spaceballs,
Yep.
the second one. Maybe we get to have another movie from him.
Sure. I mean, I'm all for it. But anyway, so yeah, it's been, very interesting to see. Like, there's a room where there's a preacher or something, and I've never seen anybody sitting in there. You just have someone yelling at the front, and there's like literally no one. There's empty. There's these white chairs. They're all empty, and at the back they have like a little pool where if somebody wants to get baptized, it's like there's not even anybody sitting there listening, much less somebody looking to get baptized. And then there's this whole thing with one of the states, they had a Confederate
Sounds like
flag.
the worst revival show ever.
Oh, yeah. Like, who's going to the Great American State Fair to get baptized? Like, is that where you would go? Anyway.
I mean, to be fair, I can see why Trump's people would think that was a good idea.
I
but
don't know about the thinking part. That's where I get stuck a little bit. I think somebody suggested it and they just went with it. But one of the states had a Confederate flag, and there is a, like, in their little
uh,
booth building, whatever, and there's a
Confederate flags, can we just fucking I'm not down in burning books. Could we burn those?
I mean, I don't genuinely understand. I mean, I do understand, but then I also don't understand how these have become so normalized again, given the violence that they represent.
Because we didn't send all the traitors to
Yep,
jail after the Civil War.
yep, yep. We tried to make amends with people who you cannot make amends with. Um, but there's a pickle company that had like their representation at this state. I have to look. It was either, I think it was North Carolina, but I could be wrong. I'll fact check myself. But there's a pickle company whose like company was represented right near the Confederate flag, and so people on social media were letting them know, like, "Hey, are you endorsing this Confederate flag?" And they were like, "Oh no, we had no idea."
Oh, it's Mount Olive Pickle Company, which is like a national pickle company.
Oh, I had never heard of them before, but yes, that's
Oh,
the
yeah, like,
one.
if you, because it's, it they make canned pickles, so if you were in, like, a condiments aisle, this is one of the main brands, like, Clausen's is pretty popular out
Mhm,
here on
mhm,
the
mhm.
West Coast, but Mount Olive is another quite prominent company, and they're based out of North Carolina, so apparently they were not pleased.
Correct. They did not know that there was gonna be that placement that way, and so when people tagged them, they were like, "Wait, we're looking into this," and then very soon after, they were like, "Yeah, we're pulling out of that. We have no interest in being affiliated with the, Confederate flag." And this, of course, this whole Great American State Fair is the celebration that we had talked about, I think, a
Okay,
few
wait,
weeks
but wait,
ago.
wait, wait,
Uh-huh.
wait. So because listen, listeners, I just looked this up, and so you have to bear with me. But now apparently, you can't make this up. An offended person in MAGA is now orchestrating a boycott of Mount Olive
Go
Pickle
for it.
Company because they weren't down with the Confederate flag.
Yeah, sure.
This is America at 250 years. We tried, guys. We tried democracy. We've tried.
Well, I saw a poll. So Gallup posted this morning a poll that they've done, and it was 77% of Americans do not think, I'll pull up the exact wording, but do not think that the founders would be happy with what's happened in this country, if they like time traveled to now. Let me get you the exact wording so that it's accurate for folks. But yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know
I
if
think.
I don't know
Mhm.
if this is the same one you were thinking of. I had just recently seen the Pew survey on, it was called like Beyond Red and Blue or something like that, but it's all about political typologies. Like, how is it that people identify themselves on the political spectrum and how happy or unhappy they are with a bunch of things.
Oh, yeah, no, this is different. This is from Gallup. It's 77% of Americans say the US founders would be disappointed by how the country has turned out. And that is the largest number. They've been asking this question since at least 1999. And that is the highest proportion that have said that they think the founders would be disappointed. They also, it was an interesting post they had. They also measure pride in America, and
Oh,
we have the lowest amount of pride in this country since they first started assessing it back in 2001. And you will not be surprised to see that there's a big gap there by the parties. So I think it was, looks like 70% of Republicans are extremely proud of to be an American, and 28% of independents and 14% of Democrats said the same. So it really is a rough time for our 250th birthday, celebration, if we can call it that. But if folks are looking for comedic relief, I would recommend just looking up the Great American State Fair. The latest thing I saw yesterday was that there's a replica of the Ark, that Trump is trying to make for himself. He's trying to make a
I'm sorry, what?
oh, you didn't hear about this? Yeah, this is
Will
one of
the
his
animals
many.
will the Republicans get on 2 by 2?
No, 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 it's like the Ark of Triumph, that kind of ark.
Oh, that arc. Oh,
Art.
I
In
arc. Yeah,
English,
yeah,
it's an
yeah.
art. In
Yeah, yeah,
French, it's
yeah.
an arc. Anyway,
Yes,
it's an
like
art.
the Arc de Triomphe. Sorry, I thought you when you
Exactly.
said that,
You
I
were thinking of Noah's
immediately
Ark?
thought Noah's Ark. because Jesus.
Right, but that you see, he doesn't actually know anything about Jesus, so that's why you could already
I
know
don't
it
think he
wasn't
knows
gonna be
anything
that.
about France.
Well, that's also true.
Oh
So
gosh.
if folks are looking for some amusement, I would recommend specifically looking for this arch, whatever you wanna call it, because so Trump is, planning to build an arch as a, you know, for
Monument to
himself.
himself?
Yeah, in honor of
Sure,
himself,
sure.
with our money, of course. And so they have this replica of the supposed arch that's there on the National Mall as part of the Great American State Fair. And there's lots of interesting things about it. Like there are these columns, like it's not a real building, right? So there are these columns that don't reach the ground. They float above the ground. Um, what are did you just look it up?
You told me earlier, you were like, "Oh, there's, like, ooze coming out of it," but when you kept saying "ark," and so in my mind, I kept thinking that it was a boat, and
Yeah.
now I realize that
No,
it's
so
a like
yes.
an edifice.
Yes, exactly. And so now, like, what I saw starting yesterday is that, like, the parts of it that have been stuck together very shoddily, mind you. Like, there's people who have gone close up and taken video, and, like, even the veneer is, like, they put paper or whatever over the front of it, but it's not even flat. There's, like, bubbles. It's like, bad wallpapering job. Anyway, so now in some of the sections where they've stuck material together, there's caulk, 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 that's yellow, that's, like, oozing out of the crevices. And this is supposed to be like a really great celebration of this country. And the other thing I was going to say is that we talked a few weeks ago about the artists who had pulled out of
Oh,
the.
yeah.
This is the same event, so this is all part of the same thing. Um, and a number of artists had pulled out because they found out that this was not a bipartisan um, event that was or celebration that was being held. Okay, the last couple things I want to say about this is one, I think Trump is scheduled to give a talk tomorrow, July 3rd. Um, so, you know, I'm sure it'll be captivating. And then he's also said that he's going to give a talk, I believe, on Monday, and something like it was projected to be something like 106 or 107 degrees, and he said, "But I'm going to do it anyway because I can do anything." And a lot of
Well,
people
he's in perfect health.
well, a lot of people online are hypothesizing that perhaps that's when it will happen. So stay tuned. We will see. Who are we to stop the president from giving a talk in high temperatures? That's his choice, really.
I believe in autonomy.
Absolutely. Um,
Um, so, and this is just we're gonna talk. We're gonna get real deep into Supreme Court stuff shortly. But the other thing that just happened, we're recording on July 2nd. Just yesterday is when all the like student loan offsets and
yeah.
everything expired. So, friend of the pod, Dr. Laura Jones, I just saw a post that she had on Instagram. Her monthly loan payment for her, like, I don't know, $300,000 worth of loans or whatever, went from like just under $900 a month to like over $3,000 a month.
Wow.
Yeah, as in like since yesterday. And it's totally untenable for you think about the impact this is going to have on so many students.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
many students and people who, invested in their education. So thanks, big beautiful Bill.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
beautiful doing such big things.
Yeah. And we're starting to see really the first big waves of people losing their healthcare coverage and
Hmm.
losing their subsidies for their health insurance. And unlike what the Republicans seem to want, we are currently still before the midterms.
Hmm.
So I really hope that these sorts of things drive people to do whatever it takes to vote,
Yeah.
regardless of the terrible impact of voter suppression.
Yeah.
What a world.
Absolutely.
Happy birthday, America. Happy birthday, baby.
Yeah, it's been such a good run. Um, hashtag sarcasm. Anyway, so shall we get into our topics for today?
Oh, well, as I mentioned last week, that the Supreme Court's been, they've been doing a little hoarding, if you
Mhm.
will. So they usually, you know, June is always a stressful time, like late May, June, 'cause there's always a lot of decisions that get released. But they really delayed the biggest, most bombastic decisions for the last
Mhm.
day, the last day. And then they're
Mhm.
like, "Peace out, we're going on vacation."
Mhm.
Um, so that is super annoying and very stressful. We're not going to talk about all of those cases, but just to recognize they really did hang on to the biggies till the
Mhm.
end. And if you just look at, for example, so the court this year in 2026 had 90 cases filed. They released 66 majority opinions, and like I think 25 of them were in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah,
So
sure.
really just a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and I know that you're going to talk about birthright citizenship. So, folks, I don't want you to worry. We are going to talk about that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, the other thing I was going to say, there were these rumors that maybe Justice Alito is retiring, and then people said no. That he said no, I'm not retiring. We will see what happens.
Mhm.
I'm doubtful. The man seemed like he had a lot to say because he had in just on uh, June 25th, he had four opinions the week of June 23rd. So they released cases on June 23rd and June 25th, and he authored four of them,
Mm.
which is a lot.
Mhm.
Um, so it's been a lot of Alito opinions. Um, so the main case that I want to talk to everyone about is there were actually two cases that were related to transgender athletes, and unfortunately, both of those cases diminished the ability of trans young people to participate in sports. And primarily, this is of course affecting trans girls
Mhm.
because no one seems to be afraid of trans boys
Mhm.
being in sports. And so, of course, these were framed as protecting the children. So, so the two cases, there's Little v. Helcox. That case itself was consolidated with a case called Ristow v. Labrador, and then there was a West Virginia v. BPJ, which are the initials of participant. So these cases, they're in Idaho and West Virginia, and both of them said, "Oh, we need to protect the girls,
Mm.
the biological girls. We have to
Mhm.
protect them from the scourge of transgender athletes," which is we are not in agreement with.
Mhm.
Um, so they claimed in both of these cases that physical harm could happen if you let these trans girls participate in sports. Um, they also, one of the things that I found really frustrating, and we've talked about this before, that this term, these phrases, biological sex,
Mhm. Mhm.
biological female, biological male, these are not biology terms.
Mhm.
These are transphobic terms. Like, these are terms that they were not part of you or I's education. These are not part of the way that biologists talk about, sexual variance. But those words, unfortunately, are all over these cases. And Justice Kavanaugh never once, in his majority opinion, referred to any of these folks as transgender girls or transgender children. He consistently referred to people involved in these cases as either biological males or biological females.
That's
And
gross.
it made my blood boil. Um, so
I
anyway,
would just like to point out that Kavanaugh did not need to be a Supreme Court justice.
no,
There was good reason for
he,
him to not have been confirmed, and yet here we are.
it's almost like rape matters. It's
Mhm.
almost like we shouldn't let rapists be on the Supreme Court because we
Mhm.
shouldn't let rapists have a lot of power and authority.
They did ask a reporter asked Susan Collins if she regrets voting to confirm him because she's in that race in Maine against Graham Plattner. He's got his own issues. But anyway, she said, "No, why would I? Why would I? Why would I?" Anyway, carry on.
I can't. Okay, I'm regulate for people who are listening versus watching. I am trying to regulate my feelings. I'm trying to regulate my feelings so that I can talk using a podcast voice. Um, So, just to refresh people's memory, we have fallen quite far in this here Supreme Court with the changing of the justices, if you will.
Mhm,
So, for example, just to remind people, back in 2020, there was a majority opinion Bostock v. Clayton County, which was a super important case. It said that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act protected trans people from being discriminated based on their sex. So this really established that you couldn't fire somebody for being transgender, that would be considered sex discrimination. And so this really improved employment protections for transgender people across the United States. So then, of course, last year we got U.S. versus Scrimetti,
mhm,
where it was unfortunately 6-3 vote, and this one said that banning gender affirming medical care for teens in Tennessee, pardon me, children and teenagers in Tennessee was something that a state could choose to do. And so this affected laws in over 20 other states. There are now, due to the many campaigns against trans kids that we've talked about, there are only a few transgender, like gender affirming care clinics that are still open and running in the United States.
mhm,
There's, I believe, 8 or 9 last I checked, as opposed to they were in the 40s before all of this uh, political using trans children as a way to win elections.
mhm,
So, so the two cases, the little v. Hecox, that one was asking, okay, can we allow schools to maintain sex segregated sports teams based on quote unquote, and again, not our term, biological sex? And so they asked the Supreme Court, do state laws exclude transgender girls from girls' sports? And does that violate the Equal Protections Clause? Um, so, unfortunately, because the court found in favor of reducing the rights of transgender children and not allowing trans girls in particular to participate
mhm,
in girls' sports, um, basically, this means now that Title IX allows women's sports and girls' sports to discriminate based on biological sex. So basically, it excludes transgender girls and women from sports and from participating in a sport that's consistent with their gender identity. And so, unfortunately, this validates other bans, similar bans in other states across the US. And then West Virginia v. BPJ, this West Virginia had a ban on transgender students participating in school sports consistent with their identity. They also brought their case related to the Equal Protections Clause, Title IX, or due process. And, you know, they won't let these kids play. That's really unfortunately, the down and out of both of those cases is that it means that trans kids who need to be supported and affirmed and treated like they matter and treated as though
mhm,
they wild are just as important as every other child,
mhm, mhm,
and they should be able to participate in sports. And like Brett Kavanaugh, who's like, I mean, pass me a beer, bro, a
mhm,
brewski, if you
mhm,
will.
mhm.
What were the names of all of his friends?
Yeah,
Scooter and Bob and
yeah,
Jim. I mean, I don't remember what their
they
real
were
names
very
were, and I don't.
broy names, I don't remember either, and they all had, like, nicknames that were really silly. Anyway.
Anyway, but like he, in his opinion, he just waxed ecstatic about like how important sports are for American life. And then he explicitly excludes this small class of kids. And it's just heartbreaking. Justice Sotomayor, well, here, I'll read you first. One of the things that this is a quote from Kavanaugh's ruling. Separate sports teams for biological males and biological females are reasonable, given the inherent physical differences between the sexes. Allowing only biological females to play on women's and girls' teams can reduce the risk of physical injury and ensure fair competition. Now, this is absurd because, of course, it turns out that there are lots of overlap across human beings that have nothing to do with gender.
Mhm,
Um, or what sex somebody is assigned at birth. So this is pseudoscience nonsense. It's not true.
mhm.
And none of these cases were brought because a child was injured by a trans child. I mean,
Right.
it's
And
outrageous.
and how many I believe there are 10 trans athletes in all of NCAA sports. All and like think about all the different sports that exist at the college level. And I believe the last number I saw was that there were 10 trans athletes. Riley Gaines, who we've talked about before, of course, posted in celebration of these rulings. And multiple people pointed out, had these rulings existed when she was a college swimmer, she still would have finished fifth place.
Because she
So
wasn't the best swimmer.
correct.
Yeah.
So she lost because she wasn't fast. She didn't lose because there was a trans person competing against her. I mean, it's so absurd and cruel. I mean, as you said,
It's so
this
cruel.
is just picking on a very small group of people who, especially the one about school sports. I mean, it's just kids wanting to play sports with their friends,
Yeah.
and the Supreme Court says no to that in
Well, and,
upholding, like, this political agenda to further marginalize this very vulnerable population.
yeah. Well, and, I was very, very fortunate. I spent last Sunday up in the city, and I got to march in the Pride Parade
Mhm,
with a bunch of my friends, and it was so lovely. And with so many of my friends who are queer, who are gay, who are lesbians, like people who are trans, and seeing the streets lined with people who got it,
mhm,
and like people, parents waving signs. I love my my trans daughter.
mhm,
I love my non-binary kid. I love my trans mom. Like just and seeing both the people who are marching and the people in the crowds like be with each other in this
mhm,
beautiful and celebratory moment. So also like for these cases to come out, I mean, both, because the court releases its decisions in June, you know, these th- these cases all come out during Pride Month, and so
mhm,
it's like this slap across the face
mhm,
to trans people in our communities. Um, so anyway, Justice Sotomayor, in writing for the dissent, said the majority applies its diminished view of the equal protection to the sports context today. One can only hope that the same misguided approach does not and will not extend to other contexts tomorrow. And so, one of the things that she pointed out was how there have been other state laws that have been not upheld because it relies on broad overgeneralizations about what boys and girls and men and women are allowed to be and do.
mm,
And those have not, in the past, withstood the test of
mhm,
the
mhm,
Supreme Court, and that has been just messed up. And so, unfortunately, what she concluded is she said the court lowers the state's burdens for justifying the use of sex classification in all potential cases. Pardon me, potentially all cases, and that it makes it easier for states to justify treating men and women differently. And that's
mm,
the other thing that I think there's so much rhetoric that is like suppressing trans people and trying to suppress their role and trying to in society and trying to diminish their existence and claim that there's something wrong with them because they're trans, which is absurd.
mhm,
Um, that is actually rhetoric that harms men and women. Like this is you cannot go after trans people and not negatively impact the safety of women, the ability of men to be able to exist and live their lives in whatever form of masculinity actually works for them, as opposed to, we talk a lot about the manosphere and how much gender policing there is amongst men. So, this is just it's a huge loss for the trans community, and it's a loss for sports. It's a
mhm.
loss for human dignity, and I hate it.
Yeah.
1 star, do not recommend.
Yeah, and the young, woman who was part of one of those cases, has been public about, um, her experience and, is obviously disappointed and represents a large number of people, not, a majority group, obviously, but, like, a large number of people across the country who are being told that they can't play sports with their friends.
Well, and this is the problem with, this whole idea of that the majority should be able to make the decisions for everybody else. Like it's a bad idea.
Mhm. Mhm.
Anyway, it's terrible. We need like radical reform of the Supreme Court for lots of reasons.
Yep.
Um So I wanted to do just 2 quick honorable mentions.
Mhm.
So many cases came out. You and
Yeah.
I were like, "How many can we really talk about?"
Yep.
I did wanna touch on, Monsanto versus Durnell.
Mhm.
So Monsanto, as people understand, is like they make Roundup, they make a chemical, that's used in farming, it's a pesticide. Um, this it's a now it says federal law now expressly preempts state law. So if there's a failure to warn, people are not going to be able to sue these companies for a failure to warn. And so John Durnell is a Missouri farmer who had originally brought this case. He used Roundup for 20 years and subsequently he developed non Hodgkin's lymphoma. He had previously won in a lower court and had won $1.25 million. But then there was a case that was brought saying that that was in conflict with it's called FERFA. I had to look up
Mhm.
what it
Mhm.
stands for, Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, which is supposed to mean that there's these regulations around the use of these chemicals. Um, so Unfortunately, this was lost. This reverses this lower court's decision. And what this means is it effectively blocks like 60,000 outstanding cases, lawsuits that are against companies like Monsanto and their parent companies. And so many, many people who develop cancer or other negative health effects from exposure to these chemicals, um, they're much less likely to win. They're much less likely to be able to even bring a suit at all. So I think this is, from a health standpoint,
Mhm.
particularly dangerous. Um, I'm going to skip my next honorable mention because I know that you have some big things that you're going to share with our audience. I don't want to take up too much more time.
Sure. I do want to just add real quick that glyphosate, I think, is the ingredient that's called into question in Roundup, and that's something that RFK Jr. has talked.
We talked about this before.
Mhm. Has talked about, and so now basically, I mean, it's just more hypocrisy is what I'm trying to say, like, that he's supposedly upset about the use of glyphosate, but now people are not even allowed to bring cases, due to harm related to it. So very maha.
Well, and he had fought against these pesticides for years and years and years when he was, environmental attorney. And then what do you know? If Trump asks you to do something else,
Just do it.
just do it.
What are morals? What is integrity? Okay, anyway, alright. So, yes, I have a
They're
couple
not
quick
for
things.
us.
Well, they're for us, you and I. They're not for the people running this corrupt government. Anyway, um, so I want to talk about 2 cases. I'm gonna start with birthright citizenship, as you alluded to earlier. And as you said, there were so many impactful rulings that have come out, in the last even just 10 days. Um, but this one feels really important, especially, I'm an immigrant. I'm not a birthright citizen. I'm a naturalized citizen. Um, but everything related to immigration, which we know is like another group, right, that this administration is targeting is all immigrants, is really important. So the basic argument that was brought by, in this case, is called Trump versus Barbara, and the argument brought by Trump, and his team is that you shouldn't automatically become a citizen just because you were born in this country. Now, this is kind of a wild assertion to make because the 14th Amendment, which is one of the Reconstruction Amendments, says, quote, all persons born or naturalized and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the US and of the state where they reside. Okay.
Sounds pretty clear.
It seems very clear. And yet the Trump's team argues that, and so by the way, that's from 1868, when we added the 14th Amendment. Um, Yet Trump's team argues that if the parents of this child are here illegally, if they're undocumented, or if they're here temporarily. Like, I don't know who is considered temporary, actually. I haven't read, like, the entire case, all the everything that's in the details, but this is the argument that people whose parents children whose parents are not documented or whose parents are here temporarily should not automatically become citizens. But again, the wording as I read it to you is pretty clear. So it doesn't say in the 14th Amendment if your parents are here with documentation. It doesn't say if your parents are permanent residents. It doesn't say if your parents are citizens. Like, none of that is part of the 14th Amendment. And and I'm sorry, I left out one part of it because I was reading it and I was like, I left something out. The actual text does say specifically in the US, which is what I thought it should say. It's all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the US and of the state where they reside. Um, so this is what they tried to argue in court. It's worth noting, just, for everyone's knowledge, that four of Trump's five children were born to immigrant mothers who were not citizens at the time that those children were born. Trump's mother was an immigrant as well. Um, and this case comes from the executive order, if folks may remember, in the flurry of executive orders at the beginning of this term, the presidential term. One of the executive orders was declaring basically that birthright citizenship is no longer. And so that's what this case hinges on. Was that executive order in violation of or inconsistent with the Constitution? That was the question put to the court. And what is very interesting is that, five of the justices said, yes, this violates the 14th Amendment. A sixth justice, Kavanaugh, did not think it violates the 14th Amendment, but he said there's a different federal law that the executive order goes against, and so it still can't be upheld. The executive order still can't be upheld, but not because it goes against the 14th Amendment. Um, and so essentially, depending how you look at it, it's either 5-4 or a 6-3 decision because Kavanaugh did side with the justices who said this executive order cannot be upheld, but just not for the same reason. The other five said this is in clear violation of the 14th Amendment. But that means
And they
for
cared.
Hmm?
And they ended up caring.
I mean, it's such plain language. I think it's very hard to say, well, that's not what it says in the 14th Amendment. But four, I mean, bottom line is four of the justices essentially said, yeah, I guess the president can make an executive order overruling an amendment that's in the Constitution. Like, we came that close to having birthright citizenship overturned because it would take one person voting the opposite
Well,
direction with something that is about as plainly spoken as it can be.
well, I will say was hopeful that it would end up the birthright citizenship case would end up this way, but honestly, like, the previous week when they ruled, in Blanche v. Lau, which was basically about people with lawful permanent residence, so
Yeah.
people who have green cards. I mean, I was much more concerned specifically that they would not rule in favor of birthright citizenship. So, I mean, I feel like you say, real real cold comfort at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I would not have been surprised, to be honest, if they had voted or ruled in favor of Trump. But even that would have been even more stunning, right, than what we have, which is again four justices saying like, I don't know, can we really say that birthright citizenship is a thing in this country based on the Constitution saying that it is? Um, it's worth noting too that in 1898 there was a challenge that was brought. A man named Wong Kim Ark, whose parents were Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
There
That's a
was an attempt
very famous case.
Yeah, there was an attempt to say that he then couldn't be a citizen because his parents were Chinese, and the court ruled in his favor that he was born here, so he was a citizen. There is a small carve out in the text around folks who are here because their parents are diplomats of foreign countries, but that's it. There's nothing there that says, oh, both your parents have to be documented, or both your parents have to be citizens, or one of your parents has to be a citizen, or like any version of that. None of that is in the written text. And so in the decision, like that's kind of the crux of it. Like this is what the Constitution says. Now, Kavanaugh, going back to him, like I said, he felt this would be fine to overturn on the basis of the executive order and the 14th Amendment alone. But there's this federal law, this like annoying federal law that this executive order is in violation of. And so he very generously in his comments outlines what the conservatives could do if they really wanted to overturn birthright citizenship. And so he says, let me give you the exact words. He says, in his view, Trump's order, quote, does not violate the 14th Amendment. He goes on to say Congress, quote, could amend that law that we were just talking about, or otherwise enact new legislation establishing exceptions to birthright citizenship for children born to foreign citizens unlawfully or temporarily in the country. But Congress has not yet done so. So basically, if Congress wanted to make a law saying any of these things, both your parents have to be citizens, one of your parents has to be a citizen, or whatever version of this that they want, he basically like told them, here's what you should do. If you really want to follow through on this, this is what you need to do. Will that happen? I don't know, but it's very disconcerting to me that that's part of the conversation here. Is not just, hey, this is not right and this should not happen because it goes against the Constitution, but oh well, but if you wanted to do it, like here's how you should do it. And by the
They've
way,
been doing a lot of signaling the last 2 years.
oh yeah. So Roberts wrote the majority opinion, and I actually didn't know this, but he explained there that part of the reason we have this, because a lot of countries don't have this birthright citizenship thing, but apparently in Britain at the time when, the folks who colonized this country came over, at that time, this rule did exist there, that children who were born in Britain automatically became British subjects. And so it was built in here because that's what they were used to in Britain at the time. That was the
The
origin.
ultimate originalism.
That's right. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, Clarence Thomas, if folks recall, just a few weeks back when we talked about
Notable yacht rider.
notable, he was in the Capitol on Monday this week. Why? What was he doing in the Capitol? There's a clip if people haven't seen it. It's pretty interesting. There's a reporter just asking him, like, "What are you doing here? Who are you meeting with? Why are you at the Capitol?" And he just laughs, literally laughs in her face for like 2-3 minutes. He just laughs. At one point, he says, "These are good questions," and she goes, "Are you going to answer any of them?" And he just laughs. Anyway, so Clarence Thomas, famously in the Voting Rights Act decision, said, this has nothing to do with race, right? Race is not part of the conversation here. We're talking about race neutral, because that was the whole point, right? If folks remember this idea that there should be something approaching equity, like if a state has some proportion of the population that's Black, there should be some proportional, or not even necessarily proportional, with some representation of those folks. Like people should have access to representation that aligns with their views. And the Supreme Court basically said, not really, like basically you're not required to have proportional representation or even
Well,
anything remotely like it.
Arghavan, it's not identity politics if your identity is being a white Christian nationalist.
Right.
That's
They're
why.
just neutral. They're just like,
Being white is
the
just sort
default.
of, yeah, white.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Anyway, so my point is though that in that case, he argued that race is not part of, this is not about
he
race.
always makes
Nothing
this
is about race.
argument.
But in this case, he specifically says that this is about race. That the 14th Amendment was specifically meant to give citizenship to enslaved people and their descendants. And so we are interpreting it too broadly to say that it applies to anybody else. So this is my point. This guy who constantly says it's not about race, it's not about race, but it's not about race. Here, he says it is. It is about race. It's not about those Chinese people or the Haitian people or it's only about the enslaved people and their descendants, and we shouldn't be interpreting this to be relevant to anyone else, which is just a wild thing to say. If folks have been following the World Cup, there's a player. So for folks who've been following the World Cup, there's a player who's been playing for the U.S. team, who's one of the stars on the U.S. team, and scored a goal in their most recent match, which they won. And his name is I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but Folarin Balogun, who is a Nigerian man, but was born in the US because I think I mentioned this briefly recently that his mom was pregnant when his parents were traveling to the US for a visit, and then she wasn't allowed to get on the plane to go back home because she was too pregnant, as deemed by the airlines. So
She
she
was like,
had to
I don't
stay.
want to give birth here.
Yeah, and she was forced to stay here and gave birth to this man in this country, and then they left. As soon as it was safe for her to leave, they left. But because he was born here, he was eligible to play on the US men's national team and has been a star of the team. So I guarantee you all these same people making these arguments that birthright citizenship shouldn't be a thing are more than delighted to profit off of this man being part of the US national team. And the last thing I want to say is that the reaction of the conservatives online to this decision has been quite wild. I mean, they have been catastrophizing that this is like the worst thing that could possibly happen. And I just want to point out that this is all that happened was they said the law that has been the law will continue to be the law. There is nothing new, nothing was changed, and these people are acting like the end of the world is coming. Matt Walsh, who, is a terrible person, he basically was like, "Well, what do you mean?" Literally, he said a Guatemalan woman could run across the border and give birth 30 minutes later, and now her kid is a U.S. citizen.
I mean, it's so weird that he claims to isn't he married and has kids? I mean, I don't know. It's just funny when I'm like, I feel like you don't seem like you've actually interacted with any women, especially pregnant women. So that's where I find the disconnect,
I
in
see.
that statement, because I feel like,
Well, there's so
I
many
mean,
problems with it because, like, we don't
I
share a
mean,
border with Guatemala, so how is that happening? I guess they're running through Mexico as well, just like it's sprinting. Just
she's very fit.
well, so
She's
that's what
very fit.
those have been my favorite responses are people saying, "Listen, if you can sprint across the border and give birth 30 minutes later, we need your child. We need your child in U.S. athletics." So I just want to point out that we are the only country competing in the World Cup that doesn't have universal health care. We are
We
one
have
of the
such a high maternal mortality rate.
we have a very high maternal mortality rate. We have no federal paid parental leave. I mean, if you were going to do birth tourism, I don't think this is the place
Man,
that
I
you
would
would choose.
definitely go to like Sweden or something, or,
Yeah,
I
Finland,
mean, yeah.
they have like such high quality of life. I mean, it's just such a bizarre thing to be like, "Oh, everyone wants to be, who wants to be here now?" Let me tell you, I don't even want to be here. I'm a citizen. I don't even want to be here because I could get picked up by ICE on the street any day, and as could any of my neighbors. This is not a place that you go right now. It might have been. I mean, it was obviously like my mom came here. We have a lot of friends who are immigrants. There was a time when it was desirable or thought to be desirable by a lot of people to come here, but this is not that time. This is not the time. So they're just worked up about all sorts of irrelevant things because they're xenophobic and racist, and that's the real problem. Okay, the other case I want to talk about briefly, because I know we're running long. That never happens. Is the mail-in ballot case. So this is
Oh, right.
Watson
Oh,
versus the Republican National Committee, and this is based on folks have been paying attention. Of course, the administration has been railing about mail-in ballots, especially Trump himself, just constantly talking about how it's cheating, even though he himself votes by mail-in ballot, as we have seen documented multiple times. But
because it's so convenient and it encourages voting.
and it helps more people vote, doesn't it? And that's really the problem because his whole mission is voter suppression one way or another. So, because this is what you do. Just to be clear, this is what you do when your policies are unpopular, when you're not likely to win an election on the merits of your arguments. So what you need to do is make it harder for people to vote. And in particular, this mail-in ballot thing, we know that for whatever reason, more Democrats will tend to use mail-in ballots in part because there are more blue-leaning states that allow mail-in ballots. And so what we saw, like in the LA mayoral race, if folks followed that, in the initial results, like the night of the election, it looked like Spencer Pratt was going to move on to the general election. But as the mail-in, and which would have been absurd, yes. But
So
as
so
the
for
mail-in
for
ballots came in, uh-huh.
but I want to for people who were not in California and who maybe didn't follow California, because our governor race, there was this risk that it was going to be two Republicans who would,
Mhm.
because we have it's called a jungle primary where all the people go against each other and whoever the top two people are get to proceed to the
Regardless of
next level,
party, yeah.
regardless of party. And so that meant that like a huge percentage of Democrats, including myself, did not vote until the last possible minute,
What do you mean?
which like, it skewed because this is why the mail-in ballots became so important is because so many people submitted them as late as possible so they could try to figure out which of the, like,
Oh, I see what you're
bazillion
saying.
Democrats
Yeah, yeah, who
they
to
could vote
support.
for to,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
because the Democratic Party here is so disorganized. They had, like,
Well, it's not just the reason I was not sure exactly where you're going with that is that it's not just that it's a jungle primary, it's that we had so many candidates. I mean, our
like,
our
50 candidates or
I don't know,
30?
the ballot was, like, more than one page of names, and
It was
so
so many.
for Democrats specifically, to your point, there was a lot of concern that the vote was gonna be split too many ways, and so, yeah, that makes sense to me what you're saying that, like, I certainly voted late, and I was, yeah, wanting to make sure it was clear, like, who are the top 2 candidates. You only get to vote for one, it's not ranked choice voting, but, like, who I don't wanna be part of the splitting of the vote and then end up with
Yep,
2 Republican candidates for governor.
exactly.
So, in the but regardless, I think, I haven't looked deep into the data on general, like, voting behaviors, but I don't think this is the only race where we've seen more Democrats using mail-in ballots, and I
Yeah,
think it's just that we trust in the process, and we believe that it's fair, and it is certainly more convenient to use mail-in ballots. Um, anyway, so this case comes out of Mississippi, where in 2020, in response to the pandemic, they had made, um the option of mail-in voting for the first time is my understanding. And so the way that they operationalize this is that any ballot that was postmarked by the election date and received within 5 days after the election counted. Now, in California, I don't believe we have a day limit. Like, it just has to be postmarked by the election. Oh, but sorry, what I was trying to say about LA, by the way, let me just finish that thought because this has come up with Trump has brought this up specifically. So the night of the election, it seemed that Spencer Pratt was going to be one of the top 2 candidates who would then the top 2 go on to the general election. But as more mail in ballots were counted, okay, I don't know exactly when they all arrived, but as they were counted over the following week or so, they broke very heavily for Nithya Raman. And so she leapfrogged over him, and now it's going to be Karen Bass versus Nithya Raman, which makes way more sense for Los Angeles as a city than for a Republican to be one of the top 2 candidates for that city for mayor. However, Spencer, Trump, their
but also,
supporters.
like, a terribly unqualified man whose only reason for running was, like, "My house burned down and that sucked."
No, his only reason for running was to get some money. Like, he
Yeah,
has
yeah,
no
sure,
money because he's wasted all his money and he wants attention and he wanted to make a reality show off of his time as mayor.
sure.
But also completely unqualified. Anyway, but so the point is that after that, once that happened and he went from, like, I guess being silly enough to think he had made it to then realizing that actually he hadn't made it because once the mail-in ballots were counted, he was no longer one of the top 2 vote getters. So he and Trump and all their supporters have made a big ruckus about how this is clear evidence of election fraud in California because Californians are just, like, cheating. I mean, there were all these people, I don't know if you saw this, but there were a lot of people on social media who were saying, I'm going to go vote in California because it's going to be that easy and I'll prove to you how much election fraud there is in California. And they did it. I mean, that's a crime, by the way, to go assert that you live somewhere and that you have a right to vote there when you do not. But they did it. They went to polling places in California. I don't know how many of them, but I saw at least a few. And they voted. Now, what they don't know is that their votes were discounted afterward because we do have a process for checking whether this person has a right to vote here or not. Um, anyway, so around all of this and going back to, of course, Trump's main issue
Sorry,
in life.
it just sounds like so much work.
Oh, yeah, I know. And also time and money. Who has the time to, like, go fly to LA to fake vote? Anyway,
In
so
this economy?
exactly. So, Trump, though, like, we all know has been harping on the 2020 election since it happened. And of course, that was one
Still.
where a lot of people used mail in ballots because it was at the height of the pandemic. And so this challenge here, this case before the court, is around this idea that this Mississippi rule that allows you to count a ballot that was postmarked by election day, even if it's received up to 5 days after, that's somehow violating federal election laws. Okay. That was the real question. And it hinged around, what does it mean? What does election day mean? Because on the one side, they're arguing that election day means your vote needs to be counted by election day, whereas the other side is saying no, it just needs to have been cast by election day, right? Like, no one's on either side arguing that I should be able to vote 5 days after the election. It's just a question of the lag between when I vote and when that ballot reaches the folks who are doing the tabulation. So, interestingly, Amy Coney Barrett wrote the majority opinion, which was that the ballot has to be cast but not received by election day. It was a 5-4 vote, with Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh dissenting. Um, it's interesting that, she raises in her opinion, she raises this question of election integrity that's been brought up by Trump and others. And she basically says that's not really relevant to this case. That's a policy issue. It's not a legal issue. The question before us is, does this mail-in voting and counting votes that are received after election day, even if they were postmarked by election day, does that violate federal election law? And it doesn't. It just doesn't. That's
Well,
the question we were asked to answer. And she says the question is not what should happen, but what does the law currently say? So again, leaving the door open for changes to be made to the law to disallow mail-in voting or to require that votes need to be received by election day. And then, of course, the reaction by Trump and others has been to push heavily for the SAVE Act, which is yet another voter suppression effort. So saying, well, if we're going to have these mail-in ballots, then we need to pass the SAVE Act to protect the integrity of our elections. And as we've discussed before, the SAVE Act requires forms of ID that many people do not have, and it requires matching names on things like your birth certificate, which anyone who's changed their name for any reason, including women who got married, will not have access to those documents. And there are documents that are expensive to get, like a passport. That so essentially becomes a poll tax, which is illegal. Um, anyway, so that's kind of what has come out of it. So the decision was favorable for people who care about democracy. It's saying mail-in ballots are not in violation of any laws that exist currently, and that counting mail-in ballots after election day is also not in violation of any current laws. But again, leaves the door open for other changes to be made. Just so folks know, as of today, 14 states and DC have laws around mail-in ballots, and actually ballots that are received after election day are a relatively small percentage of the votes received. So this was an article I saw today, and let me tell you the numbers, because it's like really really small percentages. Although they didn't have California, they had Alaska. The ballots received late in the 2024 presidential vote were 4%. Illinois was 2%. Nevada, New Jersey, Oregon, all less than 1%. Washington, 3%. So it's a pretty small number of votes that they're trying to get rid of. Nevertheless, they are trying to get rid of them. And that was from NBC. So that's the basic gist of that case. And I want to add like a little half a case, which is that Trump had asked the Supreme Court to review his the fact that he owes E. Jean Carroll $5 million for having sexually assaulted her and defaming her, and they they have, I think, something like 15 times said not now, not now, not now, and they finally said not ever. We're not reviewing that case ever. And so he really does owe her that money, which with interest is now almost $6 million. Um, and apparently his lawyers had asked her if they could have more time so that they could pursue other avenues of appeal, and she said no.
but
No.
look at
I
all
want
that
my
money
money.
he has from crypto. Just pay the woman.
I know, but he doesn't want to admit fault, right? But he also owes her 83 million from the other case. And he's still in,
I want
going
her to
through
be
his appeal there.
so rich. I want her to have all that money and I want her to flaunt it. Like, I'm not really, like, into opulence, but for E. Jean, she deserves it.
She
She
absolutely does.
deserves it.
So
Um,
anyway, now people are like, well, so now that he has no more chance of not being an adjudicated rapist, shouldn't he resign?
I mean, he should have resigned a long time ago, but you
Yeah.
know what I just
Mm,
realized that
mm,
and it's a perfect transition, if you don't mind,
mhm.
into Take Two and Call Me in the
Yes.
Morning. It's her 40th episode.
Okay, look at
Can
that.
you believe that?
Look at us.
We've just been chugging along.
That's great. Thank you for the update.
Also, I just looked up, there's 17 more weeks before the midterm elections.
Yep.
It's a lot of weeks, Arghavan.
Yep. A lot could happen.
All right, let's do Take Two and Call Me in the Morning. Give me a prescription.
Okay.
Give me fun.
Did you see what happened at the Empire State Building yesterday?
I did not.
Okay. So, like, one of the first things I saw in the morning when I went on social media was there two random people in all black outfits at the top of the antenna of the Empire State Building, like the highest point of the building, well above the
Like
observation deck.
like a real, like, tiny King Kong.
Yeah, exactly. And they had taken a banner with them that they attached to the antenna, and I wanna make sure I get it right, so I'll tell you exactly what it said. But not only that, okay, so as this was happening, there were all these newscasters being like, "And what is happening? Are there people at the top of the Empire State Building?" And, and some of them were more pearl clutching, but, the banner says, "When the power of love beats the love of power, the world knows peace."
Wow.
Um, yeah, but then it got better. So they're at the very top and they hang that banner, and then they go down. There's a tiny platform not far from the very top, and they're standing there, and then one of them gets down on a knee and proposes to the other one, and then they embrace, and then the one who got proposed to is now like taking a picture of her own hand with the city beyond her. And then anyway, it's like a whole story, right?
Wow.
So, yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, I'm not suggesting people should break laws. Um, I felt very anxious seeing them up there because it's a very narrow. I mean, it's not meant for people to be up there, and it was very windy. If you see the banner, it's like constantly blowing. It was actually hard to make out what the words were exactly because it was so windy, and they didn't have any harnesses or anything. But you know, it's an interesting story. It turns out these two are in a or have been featured in a Netflix documentary called Skywalkers, because apparently this is like a thing that they do. They scale buildings illegally, and like that's like I don't know, that's what they like
Okay.
to do together, and now they're gonna get married at some point. So
Well,
anyway,
congrats to them.
yeah. Oh, I should note that she was wearing like a Catwoman type hat, like it had little cat ears, and so it was giving a little bit of like Batman Catwoman vibe with their black outfits. Um, but yeah, anyway, so they were arrested as soon as they came down, and now they've been released, but they've been charged with like a bunch of different things, and people are already calling for Mamdani to pardon them in the interest of love or whatever. I don't know.
I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean it's a unique story if nothing else. So it's been interesting to follow and to learn more about them.
Amazing.
Yeah, how
Amazing.
about you?
I saw as friends of the pod know, I love a craft. I love a
Yeah.
crafty activity. And I saw this piece of history about there's this sort of iconic embroidery scissors or like very sharp little scissors, and they have a stork on them. They
Mhm.
look like a stork or a bird. And I did not know. Apparently, the original versions of those were from midwives from
Oh,
like the late 1700s, and they would use it to like cut the umbilical cord. Um, but also, when you attend a birth, there's a lot of sitting around. So apparently, they would also bring their needlework.
oh,
And
interesting.
so, while those scissors are no longer used in operating rooms, anyway, I don't. I am not a midwife, so I do not know if there are any midwives out there who are still using stork scissors. But you can still get these scissors that are decorated in this way.
Mm.
And apparently, some of the original versions, there's actually the stork is holding a baby, which I hadn't
Oh,
seen before, which is kind of cute. And
yeah.
so, this Instagram reel that I'll post had someone telling this story while making a wood block print, like a of these scissors, and it just looks cool.
Hmm.
Um, and then something that I know you've already seen, but our listeners may not be aware of, is we have a local Bay Area restaurant called Hobie's. It's a like breakfast brunch, delicious place.
Mhm.
And there was a picture of a receipt that was going around social media with a someone with very specific handwriting had written a note about how we don't like our coffee cake political. And Hobie's is known for its coffee cake. They are renowned for having this like really delicious blueberry coffee cake.
Mhm.
And apparently for Pride, they were serving rainbow coffee cake,
Mhm.
which I saw the photos. It looked beautiful and
Mhm.
delicious.
Mhm.
And but yeah, these people were apparently too anti woke to tolerate the existence of a rainbow in their food. And Hobie's was like, "This is who we are. We believe in love. We support all people,
Mhm.
and there's plenty of people who really like our coffee cake, so we're fine."
Yeah. I love that response from them that they just said, "Yeah, sorry to lose your business, but this is what our values are. So thanks, but no thanks." Yeah, it was great. So it made me want to go back to Hobie's.
Yeah, maybe you and we should have like a date at Hobie's, and we can report back from the front lines.
Yeah. I wish I hadn't missed already the rainbow coffee cake because that it did look fantastic.
Well, I think that's it. I think we did it.
If you didn't like what you heard, this has been the Isabel Brown Show. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to The Present Illness, leave us a review, and tell your friends.
Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at The Present Illness to stay on top of all of our TPI related news.
And we will be back next week with more headlines, hot takes, and doom scrolling, hopefully wrapped in some laughs.
Until then, agitate, hydrate, and take a nap. We'll see you next time on The Present Illness. Production by Arghavan, Salles, and Alyssa Burgart. Editing by Alyssa Burgart. Social media by Arghavan, Salles. Original music by Joseph Uphoff. Don't take medical advice from random people on a podcast. This show's for informational purposes. It's meant to be fun, and it's certainly not medical advice. Please take your medical questions to a qualified professional. This podcast is our hobby. It does not represent the opinions of our employers, just ourselves.